Hello, everyone. I'm Helen Hudson, President of the League of Women Voters of Montgomery County, and I'd like to welcome you here today to this installment of the virtual Lunch with the League. Lunch with the League is a monthly program that highlights topics of public interest, giving people information and perspective so we can all be better informed and make better decisions. These programs would not be possible without the leadership of our Lunch with the League team leader, Marco Dees, who in this unprecedented time has not only freshly taken over this program, but has taken Lunch with the League online. He produces, circulates, and of course directs these wonderful virtual Lunch with the Leagues, making them valuable resources for our community, who then has access to them at any time. Please meet Marco Dees.
Thank you, Helen. That's
thank you, Marco.
Very kind of you, doing what I can.
We have 3 guests with us today. Our primary presenter is Karen Douglas, our Montgomery clerk. She has worked for the clerk's office for almost 13 years. Karen works closely with the courts, and vital to her appearance with us today, continuously works to make the election process as smooth as possible, all the while following code and law. Yes, everyone, this is the woman in charge of everything that comprises an election, from training poll workers to sending out and receiving absentee ballots, to oversee setting up all those machines and those spaces, and to fielding all those questions on election day. I imagine Karen's office orders the food for the workers too. So thank you so much, Karen. Along with her associate and sidekick, Alexa Richardson, is a multitasker and a wonderful communicator. Under her leadership, our county has often been looked to for excellence in election procedure and technology across the state of Indiana. Karen is a tireless advocate for the election process and a skilled student of continuously moving forward on our ever-changing technology. However, one thing Karen couldn't have predicted, a global pandemic with this year's election cycle. But her office has done that, and she's here to tell us about that. After Karen's formal presentation, or informal presentation, we'll see other 2 guests in alphabetical order by party. They are Montgomery County's Democratic Party Chair, Virginia Servies, and Montgomery County's Republican Party Chair, Dan Gard. Thank you both so very much for being here to ask some questions citizens have in our most unusual 2020 primary and general election cycle. Now I'd like to turn the program over to you, Karen.
Thank you, Helen, so much. That was very, very nice of you. Yes, so we definitely have an interesting year this year, an interesting election that, like you said, nobody could have predicted any of this ever happening. So we're doing what we can with what we're given and trying to make it as easy as we can for the voters and for the public to be able to understand maybe why it is we're doing what we're doing. Why we've changed some things that we don't normally do. We've done things a little bit differently because we're trying to stay in guidelines with code, with what the governor has issued for us to do, along with the Indiana Secretary of State, as well as the Election Commission. So if anybody has not been following along, about a few weeks ago, the Election Commission signed an order. They had a resolution postponing the election. Should have been normally on May 5th. But they postponed it to June 2nd. And then they also limited our amount of hours that we have for in-person early voting. Normally we have 28 days for in-person early voting, but this time we have 6. So they really, all across the state, every clerk, everybody that has to do with elections was really encouraging people to vote by mail. Voting by mail was easy. We basically everything comes delivered to you. You don't have to leave your home. It helps to flatten the curve, as we've heard so much about trying to keep people in place, and it actually worked. So normally, yesterday was the last day for us to receive the request. So by midnight last night, that was it. But the cutoff now, we are over 3,300 people that have voted by mail. Normally, we average 300. So
Wow.
we have definitely over exceeded any expectations that we had of how many people would listen, which is great. People are listening. They want to know what's going on with us. So that's a good thing. So we already have that. We had training last night to try to prepare our poll workers for kind of some of the changes that are going to be in place for, for this election. And then we start with our in-person absentee on Tuesday. And we're there every day of the week at the 4-H from 2 to 7. We're both at the 4-H and at Hoover Elementary on Saturday from 8 to 3. And then Monday, the day before election on June 1st, we're there from 8 to noon at the 4-H building. So it's still plenty of time if you're listening to be able to go and vote early, unless you want to go vote at the polls. But we needed to do a lot of changes due to the coronavirus and COVID-19. So we had my election board, we got together and we determined what would be the safest way to still be able to have an election, but try to be able to protect both workers and voters coming in. So due to the social distancing this is now part of our vocabulary and everything that we do now, we had to kind of look at some different locations to have polling sites. So luckily, I don't know how luckily it is for schools, but they didn't have kids in school right now. That's always been our biggest thing of why we can't use the schools, is because they really don't want the public in there when the children are in there, unless they had a locked down area. But all 3 schools, North Montgomery is one of our usuals, so they're used to us, but Crawfordsville and South Montgomery both were very welcoming, letting us be able to come and look at their facilities, and then it ended up working. So the reason people are asking, why are we going from 5 to 3? The locations that we had, yes, they're big enough for a normal situation, but when we have to separate the workers and the the voters, try to keep them apart 6 feet apart, that takes a lot of room. Last evening, we were at the 4-H building for my training. We had just shy of 40 people, and we sat chairs out, ahead of time for everybody, at 6 feet all the way around. And we had almost the entire room full from end to end with chairs. That's just 40 some odd people, and you're thinking, wow, that's a lot of space it takes up just to have that many people in there. So we're very fortunate to have the schools using their gymnasiums and their bigger locations in the schools to be able to try to keep people, separate for the social distancing. So that's basically the biggest change. We encourage people to practice safe personal protection. If you have a mask, please wear it. We are encouraging our poll workers to be wearing the personal protection equipment. So it's highly strongly suggested you wear a mask and gloves. And so all of the poll workers, it's been provided for them. Secretary of State somehow found, a stash somewhere of sanitizer and cleaning stuff and gloves. And so the National Guard actually came and brought every county, including us, our delivery, so that we could have some protection for poll workers. But again, it's definitely something that everybody in the public now needs to really just think about where they're going, what they're touching, how close are they going to be to people. I think that's just our norm. Yeah, we definitely are going to try our best in this situation. We hope that everybody has patience, because it is 6 feet apart and cleaning in between each voter. And so we hope that it works out. We have diehard voters, no matter what the situation is. If it's a blizzard, if it's a flood, they're going to come out and vote. They're going to find a way. And we're the same way. If we can find a way to get you to vote, we will. So there's still plenty of opportunities for people to be able to vote in this election, especially with everything that's going on. Just need to call our office. We always say, just call. We're here, and we can find a way to be able to get somebody voted, or maybe, figure out a way to help them, find out a way that they can get themselves to the voting locations. But we've had a lot of great partnership with my election board, both my party chairs, with the Secretary of State, the Indiana Election Division, the schools, poll workers. We've had, a lot of our regular poll workers, they're at that age group where it's suggested, that they need to not be out around all those people. And for Alexa and myself, our normal travel board, they're in their 80s. We don't want them to be out there with everybody else. We want them to be protected too. So we have a lot of new poll workers this time because of that. So I'm kind of excited to see that we've got a lot of young people. They're out of school. So we've got some that are just out of college. We have some that are in high school, just graduated high school. We have some teachers. So I'm looking very forward to seeing some new faces at the polls and seeing how they like it. And hopefully we can get some more people interested in, the fun of being able to do this. So, and there's Alexa. She came in to say hello.
Okay.
Alexa's great. She keeps me sane when I'm insane. So, but that's basically it. I mean, the polls, it's still the same process. You check in, you vote, and you run your ballot through the machine, or if you're early voting, you put it in the envelope. That doesn't change. The codes and the laws, they don't change. We just have to, in addition to those codes and laws, be able to, also follow the new guidelines that are being put forth by the CDC and by, officials everywhere, trying to make sure that we can protect as many people as we can. So that's basically it for the difference this year.
So you said masks are recommended, they're not required.
I am strongly recommending, and I would love to, but they didn't make a law. But I basically said to poll workers, you need to wear a mask. You could potentially have 1,000 people walk through that room in that day. Wear a mask, wear your gloves. I mean, I talked about, the proper way of, making sure that you take your gloves off and wash your hands. If you have to touch your face, don't touch them with gloved hands. All the things that we keep hearing from the CDC. I cannot force the public to wear masks, but I can. And I did tell the poll workers, it's okay to say, please step back, please stand on the mark. It's going to be marked on the floors, 6 feet apart, just like it is when you go to a grocery store or when you go Home Depot. They were counting people, and making sure only so many people can go in the store. So we can control the room that we're in. We cannot control outside of the room. So if they want to huddle outside of that room and be more than, or closer than 6 feet apart, we cannot tell the public they can or cannot do that.
Sure.
But we can strongly suggest for the poll workers, for their safety, that they are to enforce to the people coming in to vote, please wait here until we call you forward, instead of huddling up and bunching up at one table, maybe to check in. We talked about that, call them forward. Don't check in more people than there are machines available. Usually voters are waiting on other voters. That's where the holdup is, at a polling location. And so a lot of people would get checked in ahead of time, and you would hand the voter their slip and say, okay, stand here in this other line, and when there's a machine available, they'll come take you. We're not even going to check them in until we know there's a machine available. That way we're not having a bottleneck and huddling up anywhere in the polling location. And then again, to kind of go along with, we're going to wipe down the machines behind. Every single time somebody touches a machine, somebody's going to go in behind them. And we've got some cleaning stuff, and for electric equipment, we're going to spray the rag and wipe it down and see if we can hopefully try to tame it down that way. But ultimately, I mean, it is your own responsibility for yourself to protect yourself and how you feel comfortable being protected. So, a lot of people are like, yay, we're open in the state. We're going to do everything that we always did. And other people are like, I'm not ready to go out and be around everybody right now. I'm going to stay home. The restaurants they're opening. I don't know if personally, if I feel comfortable going and sitting in a restaurant right now, but I still will go ahead and, do the curbside, pick up, take go, whatever. I mean, that seems to be working. We talked about this last night. I mean, you can lead them to water, but you can't make them drink, So we hope that everybody is, voters are very patient, that they understand that we're trying to protect everybody, because ultimately at the end of the day, we have to go home to our families, and we don't want to make our spouses or our other family members sick because we didn't take the time to at least encourage our poll workers to be able to be safe and to cover everything they can cover and try to distance themselves so that they can go home and leave their normal healthy lives without having to worry about, not being protected the way that they should be.
And on that note, I expect we'll see like partitions, some additional partitions and things maybe that we haven't seen before. And will
Yes.
there be hand sanitizer type things available anywhere?
Yes. So we have hand sanitizer, things to clean the equipment. There is, I call them sneeze guards. I don't know. It kind of reminds you of they're big plastic clear things that go in front.
Yeah.
Those will be at the check-in. We actually, we have the newer poll books. They're on an iPad. When you had somebody sign, you'd flip the iPad forward and have them touch your screen, and then you'd flip it back and you'd be touching the screen. Well, we're not going to do that this time. We actually were able to change so that our old laptops had a signature pad that was on like a 6-foot cord. And then we had another long 6-foot cord with the scanning gun that would scan your ID. So instead of us grabbing your ID from you and putting it onto the machine to scan it, we're going to have you hold it up to the glass and we can scan it that way. The signature pad will be stretched out on the other side of that glass sneeze guard or plexiglass or whatever it is. But it'll be stretched out on there. So there is a way to keep distance from people coming in to the poll workers. Machines will be separated at least 6 feet apart. Normally we try to shove 2 or 3 machines on a table. So we're just going to have a lot more tables and definitely have the flow there so that when you're leading somebody to a machine, you're not having to huddle in and squish in, and be so close to somebody on either side of you. You're definitely going to be spread out. We've instructed the poll workers, don't hover, stand back. You've got a little more room, try to make sure you give everybody their bubble, their space. And then again, once they're done touching the machine, somebody's coming in behind them and wiping it down. So we're trying to do what we can with what we've got. And we hope this is the best solution that we are able to do this. The PPE was not provided for the voters. It's for the poll workers. But we do have sanitizer and being able to clean and things like that.
Sure. So it sounds like some of the scheduling has changed, you mentioned, and then obviously a lot of the safety stuff. Let's turn it over to our panel members and see what kind of follow-up questions that they might have. Virginia, we'll start with you.
Well, I attended the training that Karen did yesterday evening, and the comments that I got back from some of the folks I had invited to work at the polls were that they felt really good about the safety measures that Karen has taken. And that was of concern as I talked to people about whether they would work at the polls or not. They were concerned about their own safety, and when the meeting was over, I heard good comments about the measures, and they felt good about that. And I was delighted because Karen and I talked about those concerns, and they're of concern to everybody. Doesn't matter how old you are, but it is, I think she's addressed those very well. And I'm delighted to hear about the number of people who have already sent in their mail-in ballots. One of the things that there's, talk about, how are those ballots handled? And I have worked enough times and seen the process that I'm confident that they're very secure. And that's one thing that I think Karen can enlighten everybody about is what happens when you get that mail-in ballot back to your office. Mm-hmm. I know that we're not going to count them until Election Day, but they are held very securely as soon as you get them back.
Yes, when you vote by mail, you have to fill out a request form. So those request forms we hang on to, we stamp them when we get them in with the date stamp so that we know what day we get them. And we have a 24-hour turnaround at the latest. We try to catch our mail by 1, but sometimes we get mail later in the day, so it goes out next day by 1. But everything's out right away. And then as each ballot comes back, when the ballot comes back, we pull that sheet from the pending stack and we move it to the completed stack. Then your ballots get locked in a 2-locked cabinet that is and in a room that there's only 1 key for. So there's actually 3 different keys that are basically needed to get to where those ballots are. We are constantly going through and making sure we are in balance, making sure they are checked in, that we didn't miss anything. Everything is matching all of our reports, and we do that frequently. to make sure that we have everything there and available. But yes, the way that we can tell also some of the, to kind of go along with your people that are a little concerned about it, when you fill out the form to request, we're matching it with your signature and all of your information on your registration. If it doesn't match, we're going to give you a call. And we've had a couple where they've used digital signatures and it doesn't match. We have to call them and say, I'm sorry, you have to sign this. We need to make sure that it's you, it's matching. Same thing when the ballot comes back. We check the signature again to make sure that that matches the registration. So we know you are the one that voted your ballot. You're the one that sealed it in that envelope. So we're handling each ballot multiple times in multiple checks through the whole process. And this is something we've done from the beginning. So not anything new for us, but since it's new for people with this option that's already been available.
Great. Dan.
First time I voted by mail. I didn't vote by mail because I was still a little hesitant about putting it in the mailbox. So I hand delivered mine, my wife, and my sons to the courthouse and delivered them to the courthouse. I had some other business to do as well. So I dropped mine off, so I know that they're there. What's the process for, I guess it's twofold. The question would be, so if you send out, let's say you send out 3,000 ballots because you had 3,000 requests. If there are ballots that have been requested but you don't receive them, then how does one know that, for, you know, if I would have requested one and sent mine in, you never got it. So when you're taking off of that stack, Karen, with the request and the ballot, when you get it back, let's say you have some left over that requested them and didn't send those in. Are those people notified that you did not receive their vote? And so they could then go to the polls on election day to cast their vote to make sure that their vote was counted?
Yes. So the volume that we have this year, it's going to be a little interesting, but usually the closer we get to election, the more ballots we get in. So our stack dwindles, it goes down.
Sure.
So we usually don't have very many that don't come back. If the voter provided a phone number, the phone number is an optional spot on the form. I wish it wasn't, but that's not my call. It's a state form. But if they have a phone number that's on there, by all means, we will call them and say, you know, just to let you know, we didn't get it. Tomorrow's the election day. So here's the locations of where you can go vote. And likewise, if we send out the ballot, with the way the post office is working lately, I'm sure people have noticed, it's not next day you get your mail. Sometimes it can take a while, and there's no rhyme or reason. The envelopes we use, both the sending out envelope and the envelope returning, they're both state forms. They've been approved through the state, through the legislation. So if you notice that if you never got your ballot, they can call our office. We can uncheck them from the absentee, basically cancel it. And then that way they can go to the polls and they can go vote at the polls. If we cancel in the system and then say we do get the ballot in, say somebody's trying to vote twice, the system will not let us. We go to scan that ballot in on that barcode and it comes up in red right at the top of your screen. The vote has already been cast for this voter. So we know and we keep track of how many we have canceled. We have reports, we have other things that we can see exactly every single step that every ballot is in right now. It's either issued, received, canceled, refused. We've had some people refuse, especially in some of the nursing homes with travel board. We'll prepare their ballot for them and they just decide they don't want to vote that day. We try again, even, call the next day. Maybe they're having a bad day. Nope. And if they say more than once that they don't want to vote, we can cancel them or refuse it. So we keep track of all of that. Same with deceased voters. If we have somebody who passes away after they've given us their ballot, but they've passed away before election day, we have to pull that ballot out. And I have 4 here, unfortunately those people have passed away. So we have to pull their ballots out, and it's definitely everything is notified to us. We keep watch of all of that throughout the whole entire process.
Yeah. I didn't think of that. Somebody passing away prior after submitting a vote. So that's interesting. And so then do you, on election day, right at the last minute, print out the list of registered voters who are able to vote that have not sent in an absentee ballot? So how does somebody what keeps somebody from voting early and then trying to vote as well on election day? So is there what is that process, just for people to know what that process is at the polling station?
Okay, so with the way that the polling, any early voting, anything with the machine, early voting election day, they are real-time connected to the poll book vendor. They're also connected to SVROS, which is the statewide voter registration system. Especially on election day when you have multiple locations open at the same time. They update every minute, and we are watching it the entire election day, every minute, making sure that all of those poll books are talking to each other. That prevents somebody from leaving one place and driving to another to be able to vote.
Right.
Same with absentee. If they vote absentee and we receive their absentee ballot in, and then they decide, you know what, I want to change my mind, I'm going to go to the polls and vote. It won't let them. You can scan their information in to get them started in the poll book, but it will not let you finish checking them in. And there's a big thing that pops up on the screen that says the ballot has already been received, must call the election office. And so then we can tell them, I'm sorry, you know, you've already voted. You can't vote again. So not vote early, vote often. That does not apply.
Right.
And I hear that a lot in every election.
Let's say somebody casts their vote early on an absentee ballot the very first day, and somewhere between the time they send that in to the actual election day, something has caused them to change their mind on a candidate. Are you able to, with their consent, pull their ballot and they recast one on election day?
No, once they voted, that's it.
Yep.
Once we've received it in, that's it. Same with in a primary, you have to choose which party.
Mhm.
So you check the box and you say which party's ballot you'd like for us to send you. Well, we've had a couple people call us and say, oh, well, they maybe not understand the primary process, or they just decided, well, not who I was looking for is on here. Well, I'm sorry, you've already signed that form, you've checked the box, and that's the ballot we have to give you. Back in the day,
Somebody moved from another state that doesn't have open primaries,
right, right. Back in the day, you used to be able to beat your ballot. So we would deliver the absentee ballots to the polls, and it would be sometime, midday. So you could go in the morning, and as long as it wasn't signed in the poll book, either absentee or with your signature, you could go ahead and vote. And then if your absentee ballot came in, they would just say, okay, already voted, and it would cancel the absentee out. They stopped that a couple years ago. So you can't beat your ballot to the polls. And we're central count now, which means all 3,000 of those ballots that come back in and all of the early voting, those do not get counted until 6 a.m. on election day, same time as the polls open on election day. So everything has to be counted on same day. Nothing is tabulated or figured out beforehand.
Darren, I've got a quick follow-up to one of Dan's questions there. How common is it that someone might forget and mail one in and then try to hit a poll later or whatever?
I really haven't had it come up too much. Most people know one way or the other. Usually it's not that they forgot they voted absentee, they wanted to change their mind. And it's not able to do that anymore, being the way that the system is with the state. I mean, everybody's central count now. It used to be that the county could choose kind of how they wanted to do their absentee, and it's all done centrally now. Everybody's counting.
And not all counties do it the way that we're not all using the same software or programs or process. So it could vary from county to county.
Correct. So yeah, everybody has different systems. Fortunately, I'm very happy with the system we picked. We have the paper backup. There's a lot of pros to our system versus some of the other systems that we've seen. But they are, however they do their processing with their computers, every county is supposed to be scanning in or tabulating, I guess tabulating is a better word, their ballots on election day. This year they changed it. Normally we have to have them all in by 6 o'clock. It's not going to happen with the volume of mail out ballots that we have this time, and being the presidential. They've actually changed that for this election, I think this election only, to June 12th, which is 10 days after. An election results are unofficial until 10 days after an election. So June 12th would be our date anyway to say, okay, officially these are it. But you've got counties that are the size of Marion County, Lake County, Vanderburgh. They're going to be tabulating ballots for days after, running them through. So fortunately, there's something we said for living in a small community. We can be able to, our plan is to have them all in that night. So results should hopefully be about normal. I mean, normal time. we get them back pretty quickly. So, but yeah, all the ballots have to be central count now, with whatever equipment that county might be using.
So see, a mail-in ballot has lots of parts to it, but I think there's something that is very friendly to the voter, and to know that it's held in secure facilities, to know that it's handled and counted along with every other ballot, I think is very reassuring. And one of the things that I think is a big plus for the mail-in, particularly in a situation like this where there's some concern about the health of people standing in line and taking time away from their security of their home.
We take every vote, we treat it the same, whether they voted by mail, whether we came and visited them at their home or in their facility, whether they came early or whether they came on election day. A vote's a vote. It counts on your history exactly the same. A vote history, we can see every time somebody's coming to vote, they all count the same. They all should be treated the same, and we try to do that. I mean, it's just done differently, but your end result's the same. You choose which candidate you would like to see move forward, and that should hopefully never change, no matter what the system is, whether it's which county system or how their ballots look when they mail them out. It's all should be very similar. Code says we have to have certain things on the ballots. So if you really want to ever get too technical into it, you can see all the different wording on the mail out ballots. It even tells us what order the offices have to go on the ballot and how they're titled. And so those are all the same regardless of what system a county is using. That's the way everybody has to have it done, but they just might have a different system and order of how they do things in. That can be left up to each county. So, like, again, fortunate we live in a little small community that it's going to be manageable. But being in a larger county, it's going to take a huge team of people to get them to get their ballots in time.
So Karen, do you in the morning when the polls open at 6, any of the ballots you've taken in, do you have one or two people that go over and manually feed those through the machine to have them counted? Is that how that happens? And if so, it shouldn't be any problem, because getting that done by the end of the day, if you have the same, unless there's just an astronomically higher number of people of ballots going into the machine, you still have that 12-hour window to get them in there, and it would actually go faster than people standing in line and casting their votes. The votes have already been casted. You're simply just running them through the machine.
Right. So we actually just got it's called a mini scanner. So when normally what we were using was the same type of machine, that the voters are using when they're pushing their ballot through. It kind of like sucks it in, and then it just waits a second before you can put the next one in. We actually have a scanner that's going to run them through real quick. So that is nice. That's going to help us out a lot. But you still have to open every envelope. You still need to make sure they're all flattened. You still need to make sure that, there's a lot to do before you can just shove it in a scanner or shove it in the reader. And that does take time. Virginia was with us a couple years ago in 18's general election. It was that senator race, and everybody was coming out to vote. We were opening envelopes and running them through until 5:45 that night. It was like 5:30, 5:45 that night. So we're hoping it goes a little bit quicker. We can only go at the mercy of the machines. So they're set up to be used for voters at the polling location. So this mini scanner is definitely going to help out a bunch. A lot of counties are going to that this year, knowing the high volume of the mail out ballots. And most vendors offer something like this. So yeah, I mean, we make sure that we start right away at 6 a.m. when we're allowed to be able to slice open those envelopes. We start and we count them then, and we count them again. So we make sure that they're all getting run through, and we know how many ballots we've received up till that point per precinct. And we know at the start of the counting, Brown precinct, that's titled Brown, might have 100 votes. When we're done, we have 100 that's been tabulated through the machine. So we're just counting lots of different ways all day long.
I would like to ask One, just reflecting, because this is so much in League's bailiwick. It's very exciting to me that we have all these new young poll workers, and I'm sure it is to all of us. I mean, because what it suggests is that young people, because of this very strange situation, are becoming mobilized and more interested in the machinery of government a lot sooner than they often do in their lives, just as a typical pattern over the last century or whatever. Do you see that? Just reflection on your young people last night. Were they pretty excited, seemed to take it seriously, going to spread it among their friends? Just seeing how we're reaching the next generation here.
I hope they're spreading it among their friends. I think it's great whenever you get anybody interested in the process, you know, again, what's been said, regardless of their age. And I think everybody last night, I saw attention focused on me, and I like to talk a lot, so I can tend to, you know, probably make people daydream. They were paying attention, and I've had a couple of them that say they're just so excited about being able to see how this works. So I couldn't be more thrilled. We have some new people. We have teachers. I'm so excited to have educators come in. Those are the people that can help say, hey, you know, I worked at the polls. I might not teach government, but I'm going to talk to my government teacher. You know, you should have them come in, have them talk to them. You know, I've gone to schools before. I love it. I love being able to tell them. I think a lot of it starts with at home. You know, I remember going with my parents when I was little, which we had polling locations in the neighbor's garage. In California, if the weather's nice, you could do it outside. So we would walk down there. I remember getting excited to go with my mom and dad to go with them to vote. I think it starts with my age now. I have a 13-year-old. She knows how important this is for voting. I tell her about voting. I think that's what we need to do as parents, as grandparents, you know, whatever. Try to start letting them, you know, have them come with you. It's okay. I don't know in this election if you want your child out around all these people, but it's a good idea. It's explain to them what you're doing. Hey, I'm going to go vote today. You know, you don't have to tell them one way or the other how you're voting, but explain the importance of voting and why it's important. And I think if you start talking about it to your children, then they're starting to get excited. So the kids that, you know, are working, I guarantee their parents that were there last night, or the kids there last night, I'm sure their parents are voters, you know, so it's kind of like, you know, a revolving, like a circle effect. And that's, I think that's for anything, you know, your parents, you lead by example, grandparents, you lead by example, and just to even bring it up in conversation. Hey, it's election day tomorrow. Do you know what that means? You know, when they're younger, you can explain that to them. And I think that's kind of what's going to help get the next generations excited about what's going on. So many times I've heard, oh, it's just one vote. You know, I'm busy. I'm not going to come in. It's just one vote. Sometimes it could be one vote, you know, and every vote matters. Every vote counts. And I get discouraged when I hear that. So I explain about it. I'm like, no, you could have a very close race. So it's getting people to know that it's such an important thing. And under normal circumstances, it takes less than 5 minutes. I mean, you get your ballot at home. If you got it through the mail, you're filling in bubbles like the old tests at school. You fill in the bubble next to which candidate you choose. You fold it back up and you stick it in your mailbox. I mean, it wouldn't take not even 5 minutes to do it. So it's we need to get past the, oh, you know, it doesn't matter if you vote or not. No, it matters. And we need to get people to understand the importance of turning up. Turn up and vote, you know. Registering's easy. You have to go vote. That's the next step. You got to complete that registration by voting.
You might be interested that we have a family that the mom and dad and their teenage kids are all going to work at the polls, and they were excited about doing that. And I thought that was really, I don't know, a unique situation where the kids were available, the parents were available, and they were all going to go and work together.
Yeah.
Talk about education. There it is. I think this is a perfect opportunity too, with all our families hearing this, we hope online, that right now we have at the Carnegie Museum an exhibit called We the People, Me the Person. And it's all about how our government works. And it includes lots of things about voting. It includes things about suffrage, since this is the 100th anniversary of women being able first to vote. And so I encourage everyone who's seeing this to please go visit the Carnegie Museum at distance as soon as that's possible and enjoy that too in the broadest way possible. But that's a great story, Virginia. That's what we encourage in school. That's true homeschooling right there.
Also, to kind of go with that, just to talk about the importance, we have elections 3 out of 4 years in an election cycle. People think you just show up just to vote for president. And there are so many other important offices that are up on the ballots right now. Local offices. If you want something directly that affects you, your local offices come first. Governor, your state representatives, you know, your congressman. There's so many other things to be voting for. And a lot of people show up every 4 years thinking it's just president. And yes, president is important, but so are our local offices, from your state delegates who pick your person to be going, like this year, it's attorney general, from your precinct committeeman, that's your local person in your neighborhood who represents your party to go to your party for things that you need. So I strongly just recommend, please, you know, your local candidates, this is important. This directly affects you. Commissioner, council, that's your taxpayers' dollar. Council, you know, looks into that. Commissioners, they make great decisions on what we need to be doing with our taxpayers' dollars. So if you want a voice in how that's going to happen, well, your local candidates is where that is. But again, I mean, we're happy to have anybody turn up and vote. I just hope people pay attention. There's so many more offices available than just the one top office.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's time to mention too that you yourself, you who are watching this, can be one of those candidates. First, you can be a voter. We want everybody to vote first, but then consider being part of the process. I mean, I'm sure that's how Karen and Dan got started, right? That's how Virginia got started, right here in our county, seeing needs, seeing things you'd like to have done, and suddenly you're one of the people who are making those choices. Yeah. Other questions by Dan or Virginia?
Well, I'm always impressed with how Karen and her staff get the job done in a very friendly, nice way, how they deal with some very difficult problems. And I think she and her staff do a really good job. So it's not something that happens overnight. It takes months of planning and work in order to make an election run. And I've been involved in several of them, and I think they run very well. They're secure. I have great faith in the way that all of the election in Montgomery County is handled, and the fact that we have paper ballots to follow up. I think that's very important, and I'm glad that that decision was made to have that type of equipment several years ago. But we are in good shape as far as it goes with the election.
I remember first year I worked the big whole day that first year that the new equipment was in, and I was so impressed that the people who installed the equipment were on site all day monitoring, making sure that things were working right, and that they, you know, I second what Virginia said. I mean, that we always have a backup. We hear these national stories all the time about voter security, and that's one reason I commended Karen so highly in my introduction, because our county is really a leader in that field. We're fortunate. Yeah. Just out of curiosity, because people are always looking forward, and you're such an imaginative thinker in this way, and I'm sure everybody across the state's talking about it. Are people talking about November? Will everything stay pretty much the same for the November election, or will we just wait to see?
Well, I think it's a little of all of the above. I think we need to be flexible, because I think, as we're finding out in this past couple of months, everything's subject to change, even daily. So they, with some of the equipment that the personal protection equipment, with the Secretary of State's information from them and from the state, they said, whatever you have left over, hang on to it till November. So I think, you know, listening in on the news and then with what's going on, they're predicting that there's a possibility it's going to come back just like the flu does every year. And so I think for sure we'll do as much social distancing as we can. We're fortunate this time that the schools are not in session, so we're able to use their facilities. If we have to go back to where we were using before, which our normal places are amazing and I love them, it might be that people are going to be having to, the lines are going to be pushed outside because there's not enough room inside to keep people as 6 foot socially distanced as we can. But again, it's as much encouraging and as much advertising and trying to get the word out there that there are other options than having to stand on election day. But I think we'll have to take it as it comes and, and see where we're at that time. I don't look for them to postponing the November election. I mean, this is presidential, always, the first Tuesday in November kind of thing. And that's going to be interesting. But I also know other states have done, some of them are all by mail. Nobody's going into the polls. So we're kind of in the middle between both of those things, trying to encourage by mail more, but we also are still offering people that still, they're diehard. They want to come in. They look forward to walking into the polls every year. That's their, highlight. We still have that available, but we also need to just keep in mind that everything's subject to change. So, be a little flexible, but regardless, there will always be an election. This is, kind of what I was telling my daughter, I can't afford to go out and run around and be sick because there still has to be an election. If I'm not here, it still has to happen. So they're not ever not going to have an election. It just might be done differently.
Excellent. Well, I commend you and your team on all your efforts. This is a trying time.
All right. Thank you all so much for your time. I'd like to thank our guests so much for joining us today, and thank you all for tuning in to learn more. In closing, I'd like to say that the League of Women Voters Active Voter Service team, headed by Myra Dunn Abbott, works very closely with Karen on elections. And right now they're distributing cards to every town in Montgomery County with election information on it, and working in many other ways to keep voters informed and helping the clerk's office. I'd also like to thank our partners at the Crawfordsville family of radio stations and our 2 local newspaper editors for their partnering on all of this highly unusual way of doing an election when candidates can't meet their citizens face to face. So have a good day, everybody. Stay safe, and we will see you at the next virtual Lunch with the League.
Thank you.
Thank you.